really goes to, and especially when I teach in Genesis about Abraham, that most likely there just happened to be the same pattern, the same thing that God's been doing forever. And I'm at a loss for this particular word, but when Abraham walks out maybe at night and he's maybe troubled in his heart or feeling guilty or condemned about something in his life, and he just walks out at night and he looks up at the night sky, and there's all this vastness of stars. And if you've ever been away from the city and away from a village or a town and just out there's just nothing around but the heavens, the stars, and you look up in all the multitude of stars and just walking around looking at the earth, the perfection of it, the rain that comes, the oceans that fill up, the evaporation goes back into the clouds, the whole cycle repeats itself day and night. There's no skip with God. There's no misfire with all this design that God has made. And I would say that it could be a good possibility that Abraham was walking out under the night sky, looking up at the stars and saying, God, who are you really? I've seen the idols of the land. I've seen the philosophy and the beliefs of mankind as they make up their own gods that cater to their own rules. But I want to know who really made the heavens, who put the stars up there and made the earth to go in such a way that it's so perfect. And I would say that desire to know who God was through viewing the handiwork and viewing the creation of God brought Abraham to a place where he learned to pray, walk with God, and as he began to take those steps towards God, God recognized it and started also walking towards Abraham. And so in Psalms chapter 19 it says, this is David, a psalm of David, it says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament show his handiwork. He's the artist behind the whole thing, the architect. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night shows knowledge. There's no speech or language, verse 3, where their voice is not heard. Speaking of what God had placed out there for men to look at and say, there has to be someone behind all this. There's no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. The voice of the day day unto day uttering speech, and night unto night showing knowledge. Their line has gone out through all the earth, their words unto the end of the world. In them he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heavens, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. We're just going to stop there. So when we look at something and we say, okay, here's this beautiful building, who designed it? Here's this painting by Van Gogh. We know that Van Gogh wasn't a modern artist. He didn't just throw a canvas on a drill, spin it, throw paint, and say, here's a creation. That would have just been well, I'll leave that be. But he painted something from the imagination of his mind, say a Van Gogh. And you know what he's done. You can recognize all Van Goghs because it's the same pattern. He does the same things over and over and over. It's his style. And to look at a Van Gogh painting and say, it just happened, some guy was spinning his canvas on a drill and threw a bunch of paint on it, and it created this Van Gogh with cityscapes or landscapes or villages or towns or roads or flowers, whatever it happened to be. To say it was an accident would just be absurd. It'd be an insult to the artist. And in the same way, God put all this together for our eyes to be drawn to. He gave us eyes, ears, knowledge, wisdom, so that when we forget God, when mankind or the world forgets who God is, then they can begin to start looking at the simple things like a flower and say, it's got to have a designer. And flowers are flowers throughout the world. They have the same designer. You look in the heavens and you see the stars and you see how the earth goes and the seasons and the days and the time and the perfection of it all. You look at a river flowing and it doesn't stop flowing year after year after year. It's flowing. And the fields producing their crops and the trees growing around the world and the way the world cycles things, and we can pollute it all we want to, and for some reason there's all these built-in filters to clean out and to make everything better again so quick. It's an amazing thing that God did, and to look at it and say, there's no architect. I look at the heavens and all I see is that billions of years ago something blew up and just splattered on the canvas, and there it is. What an insult it really is to God. If we can recognize the handiwork of God, the design of God, in all the animals, in us, in what He's done, and the way things have made, and the sun that's in the sky, and the moon, and all that goes on, and to be able to look and hear the voice that it's saying, there's a God in heaven. It utters its voice throughout the world. This continual cycle from generation to generation to generation without fail. This continual thing, and we can see God in all that. We can see the architect, the designer, and we say, I want to know who you are. I would say in that itself is what sparks something in the heart of God that says, if you really want to know, I'm going to show you. See, I've heard people say that if God would come down to me and tell me, then I would believe. But God doesn't need our belief. He doesn't need you to believe in Him. He doesn't exist because you believe in Him. That would be a philosophy. That would be a religion. God is regardless of whether we believe in Him or not believe in Him. He is anyway. And He doesn't need our belief. He doesn't need us to love Him. He doesn't need our company. He doesn't need our fellowship. We need His. And so He put all these things around us to spark an interest. Who's God? How does all this work? It can't be an accident. It's impossible. And so I want to get to know the architect, the designer, the painter, the creator of all these things. And that spark inside of our heart calls unto God. And when we call unto God, that's when God starts showing Himself more real to us. Somebody who's lived for God for many, many years knows how real God can be. They've felt His touch in times of prayer. They've experienced His power in times of weakness. They've felt His healing in times of sickness. They've seen God answer prayers over and over, and they know Him because they had that interest to begin with, and God just nurtured that interest. When someone doesn't have an interest, God's under no obligation to nurture something that you're not interested in. But when David, he was out a lot, warring a lot, out at night a lot, away from the city a lot, looking up to the heavens. Look at the handiwork of God. I want to know not the religion, not the philosophy, not some science that says it was a big old accident and so are you. What a bunch of junk. I want to know the God that created me in His image. To know the God that made me like I am. To know the God who can wash my soul. To know the God who can cleanse my sins. To know the God that loved me so much He sent His Son to die for me. To know the God that created a place in heaven that our eyes are not built to see yet. The glories of God and all that He's made for us. If you have a spark of interest in God and all that He designed, God won't hide Himself from you. Nurture that interest. Keep growing in it. To whom little is given, or too much is given, much is required. We could say it that way. The more you have an interest, the more you want to know, the more God's going to show you. And I would say, get interested in God. Seek the Lord. So Scripture says, seek His face. Seek the person of God. Seek the one who created. Get to know Him. Let Him abide in your heart. He makes everything so much better. He gives purpose and hope and meaning. He's a wonderful God. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.